headlines this evening. Russian forces seized the largest nuclear plant in Europe on day 9 of its invasion of Ukraine.
The first batch of Nigerians fleeing the conflict in Ukraine arrive in the country as more flights are expected in the coming days.
While NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg rules out sending NATO troops to Ukraine or setting up a no-fly zone over the country. Well, thanks for staying with us. This will be 1 full hour of our second coverage of the day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
And I'm Millicent Walker. International calls are increasing for Russia to call off its war campaign in Ukraine. The latest being the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who had a telephone chat with President Putin today. He urged him to hold all military actions immediately.
Scholz also called on Putin to allow access for humanitarian aid in areas where fighting has taken place. Details of their conversation are coming out hours after fire broke out at the world's largest nuclear plant in Zaporizhia, which Russian troops took over this morning.
Several people have been killed or injured, even though the fire has since been extinguished. Ukrainian authorities say Russian forces have seized control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's the largest facility in Europe. A fire broke out at the complex early on Friday morning, but it has now been extinguished, and officials say the site is safe. Ukraine says several people were killed and injured. However, Russia has denied attacking the site and blames the blaze on Ukrainian saboteurs. But Ukraine's allies have condemned Russia for the act.
We condemn the attacks on civilians, and over the night we have also seen reports about the attack against the nuclear power plant. This just demonstrates the recklessness of this war and the importance of ending it, and the importance of Russia withdrawing all its troops and engage in good faith in diplomatic efforts.
I think we call upon the Russian president to absolutely cease attacking sites such as that. It's incredibly dangerous. It's not just dangerous for Ukraine and the Russians, it's dangerous for Europe, and it is playing with fire that really is beyond anything to do with logic or necessity, and we, in the strongest possible terms, ask him to stop that. If it is either being done deliberately, then it must be stopped. If it was done by accident, then I ask his leaders to make sure, his military leaders, they are very, very careful with the infrastructure they are attacking.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has appealed to Russia to stage protests over Russian forces' seizure of the nuclear plant. He also urged his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, to meet him for talks. It comes as Kiev and Moscow agree to a tentative plan to create humanitarian corridors following a second round of negotiations. The Russian president has urged Moscow's neighbors not to escalate tensions by imposing more sanctions or restrictions on his country, saying the Kremlin has no bad intentions towards them. He says those that refuse to cooperate will harm themselves as well as harming Russia. While Kherson, a major port city of Ukraine, is under Russian control, other cities, including the capital Kiev, northeastern Kharkiv, and Mariupol in the southeast, continue to be attacked. Russia's offensive has sparked a mass exodus from Ukraine and a rapidly escalating humanitarian crisis, with the United Nations saying over 1 million people have fled the country.
The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now. Anna, let's check in with you regarding the fire at the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. Several people have died, many more injured. Was this a deliberate attack by Russia?
Hello. Well, it was. It's not possible to just accidentally shoot nuclear power station a couple of times. It's well, it's obvious, and unfortunately, this is very, very scary because, well, this power plant is 6 times more powerful than Chernobyl. So if something happens, it will be 6 times worse than Chernobyl. And firefighters, thanks God that they stopped the fire under the attack. Now the power plant is controlled by Russian soldiers. For the moment, according to the latest information, everything is working fine, so it's no danger. But again, there is a danger of another attack.
And yet employees are monitoring the situation, Anna, as are Ukrainian and Russian military, correct?
Ukrainian workers of the power plant are inside, but power plant is controlled by Russian soldiers.
Anna, I mean, you're in the car and you're doing this live. I just want to know if it's safe where you are and what's happening around you.
Well, I'm in a safe place. Thanks God, nothing is happening here. Well, we do hear sometimes some air alarms, sirens, but nothing really happening comparing to the rest part of the country.
Yeah, so tell us, do we know how many cities have now fallen in the invasion to Russian troops?
Well, unfortunately, I should say that Kherson is controlled by Russian forces. It's sitting next to the sea. Mariupol is fighting as much as it can, but Mariupol is now at a humanitarian catastrophe, so they need a humanitarian corridor ASAP. Yesterday it was agreed, but until now nothing happened, so no corridor allowed it yet. So Mariupol is fighting, but again it's completely surrounded. Zaporizhia, as we know, power plant is controlled by Russian forces. So far, Kherson is the only city that actually fallen, so the rest is still fighting.
So Anna,
and some little small cities as well.
Small cities. Anna, are you speaking to those who are saying that they will fight for their country? And this is talking about Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, how close are you getting to knowing how they feel about this war?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in the territorial defense, and in general, people here are very positive. Today we had like the latest information that we have in. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, I'm sorry.
No worries. 82%
of Ukrainians believe that everything will be fine and Ukraine will fight back. People are very positive. People are ready to fight. Military, police, territorial defense, nation. Nation is very united. So everyone does whatever they can to help. Either it's humanitarian help or territorial defense, but everyone are very united.
Thank you, Anna, for bringing us up to speed on this, and we wish you safe travels as you try to get to more safe places in Ukraine. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Some more now on the world's largest nuclear plants, the nuclear power plants in Ukraine. The International Atomic Energy Agency chief, Rafael Grossi, says there's been no damage done to the reactors at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants. There's also been no release of radioactive material after projectile hit a nearby building on the site overnight. He suggested meeting both Russian and Ukrainian officials at the defunct power plant Chernobyl, where Russia has seized the radioactive waste facilities near the site of the world's worst nuclear accident in 1986 so that they could commit not to do anything to endanger nuclear security in Ukraine.
Overnight, a projectile hit a building within the plant site, within the site of the plant. This building, I should repeat, is not part of the reactor, is none of the reactors, is a training adjacent construction facility to the reactors. This caused a localized fire, which was extinguished. We, of course, are fortunate that there was no release of radiation and that the integrity of the reactors in themselves was not compromised, but yes, the plant in a wider sense. But it is obvious that when we all agree on these principles, words must mean something. And we have to act in consequence. So for us, the IAEA, it is time for action. We need to do something about this.
Let's talk some more about that plant in Zaporizhzhia. Dr. Olamide Samuel, an expert researcher in arms control, international security and nuclear politics at the University of Leicester, joins us now. Welcome to the program, Dr. Samuel. The nuclear plant was taken by the Russian troops this morning, but the Ukrainian authorities said they still had their eyes on it and that there were no concerns there. Now that there has been a fire and there are fatalities as well as casualties, are the worst fears behind us? And this is regarding this all-important infrastructure in Ukraine.
Oh, thank you for having me. With regards to your question, I believe the worst is behind us with regards to the Zaporizhzhia power plant. However, I wouldn't just say we're out of the woods just yet, because whether intentional or accidental attack on the nuclear power plant actually sets a precedent where a conventional conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which in itself is a nuclear power, has taken on a new nuclear dimension. So usually the narrative around the Ukraine-Russia war has been around stopping escalation in this conventional conflict to a nuclear conflict where nuclear weapons are involved. However, not much consideration has been given to the fact that civilian nuclear installations could be a target for military purposes. And so to claim that the worst is behind us at this point in time would be to ignore some of Russia's strategic objectives in this particular theater, which is to cripple the Ukrainian economy and to cripple Ukrainian resolve. And one way to do that would be, of course, to attack its ability to stay resilient in the face of Russian aggression. And so targeting Zaporizhzhia is one way of limiting the amount of electricity that Ukraine can produce at this point in time. This power plant is actually responsible for about 20% of Ukraine's electricity generation. And so it is a strategic asset for both Ukraine and for Russia.
Now, President Zelensky was saying that nobody should go and plant explosives there and then blackmail the entire world with nuclear disaster. Is that a possible scenario?
It is more and more likely as the Russian side becomes more desperate to gain a strategic advantage in this conflict. However, I wouldn't, rule out the possibility of also, false flag operations, depending on how desperate the Ukrainian side might get in this conflict in the long run. So we wouldn't rule out anything with regards to the placement of explosives at nuclear power plants.
So the concern is also the risk of radiation at the power plant. Although the Ukrainian officials say that, that has been taken care of, is it really safe there right now? What do you think?
At the moment, the Ukrainian narrative has been corroborated by the IAEA. And so their radiation monitoring systems are operating with minor glitches, as we saw in the Chernobyl power plant. But at this point in time, there's no significant radiation escalation. There's no pollution at this point in time. So it remains stable. However, I must highlight that even though there was no damage to the nuclear reactors themselves, we're seeing a situation where only one of the reactors, because there are six power reactors at the power plant, only one of the reactors is running on 60% capacity. And this is an issue in the long run because we have the presence of spent radioactive nuclear fuel in those facilities. And these spent fuels have to be kept cooled and they have to be monitored. And this requires electricity and energy. Now, usually nuclear power plants have backup systems that generate the electricity required to keep nuclear waste at a minimum temperature. But as the conflict rages on, we might find a situation where the power plant itself is not being provided with enough electricity to keep these spent fuel rods from going critical. So it's a very unstable situation if we're thinking about the medium and long term, especially in the context of an active conflict.
Yeah, and looking at the war in Ukraine, there's no doubt, that the contracts and that have been signed between Russia and certain countries might be affected. For example, Nigeria, as reports say, the government has launched a tender for the country's first nuclear power station, which is a 4 nuclear reactor plant, with total output of 4 GW, about a third of the country's present installed generating capacity. What's the possibility this deal will still go through now that Russia is fixated on its war in Ukraine?
It's a multifaceted question. It depends on where you're approaching the question from. So let's start with the Nigerian perspective. I presume you're referring to Dr. Yao Idrisi's proclamation on the 28th of February about the potential for Nigerian nuclear power. From the Nigerian side, I would say there's many more hurdles to be overcome before the country is even deemed safe or ready for nuclear power. In 2018, for example, we had the rushed extraction of high enriched uranium cores from ABU Zaria because of the security situation regarding Boko Haram terrorists. And this is a nuclear security concern for a research reactor, which is much more, much less significant than a commercial nuclear power plant. So we still have the issues of Nigeria's ability to provide security for civilian nuclear power. If we park that to the side, I believe Russia's fixation on the conflict in Ukraine is eventually going to have negative ramifications for its ability to do business, generally speaking. And so, this is going to have a knock-on effect on its memorandums of understanding and its negotiated deals with many would-be civilian nuclear powers. So I believe that, there's going to be significant hurdles to overcome with regards to the sanctions and the cutting off of Russia from the international economy. But this might also, in the very long term, and this is speculative, but also perhaps encourage a closer practical relationship between Russia and China, China being another major player in Africa, to bypass some of these sanctions, depending on how this conflict plays out. But there's significant factors to think of, both on the Russian and on the Nigerian side, with regards to the feasibility of nuclear power in Nigeria.
Well, finally, Dr. Samuel, and this is perhaps away from Nigeria and her contracts, the head of the UN's nuclear energy watchdog has offered to travel to Ukraine in a bid to broker a deal with Russia and avoid further damage to radioactive power plants during the conflict. What do you see happening? Will Russia be willing to reason on this? And then there is, of course, Ukraine.
Yes. So Rafael Grossi earlier in a press conference, which you showed your viewers, did indicate his willingness to go to Ukraine and negotiate or he wanted to stay away from the term mediator, but essentially that's what he would be doing in addition to his monitoring functions. I believe Grossi has the political capital and political goodwill on both sides to be able to at least extract civilian nuclear power plants from the wider conflict, in the sense that these nuclear power plants are not just a security concern for the belligerent states, but a security concern for Europe more generally and the world in general. And so I think his unprecedented visit to an active conflict zone to broker and monitor a nuclear power plant is just indicative of how salient the security issues around nuclear power are. And I think there might be some positive response to such an unprecedented risk-taking move from Rafael Grossi. We'll wait and see what the outcome of that will be.
Indeed.
Indeed. Dr. Olamide Sambo, expert and researcher at the University of Leicester. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and, of course, your expert analysis on the situation with the nuclear power plant in Ukraine.
Thank you for having me.
Well, still to come, a NATO chief rules out sending NATO troops to Ukraine or setting up a no-fly zone over the country.
Stay with us. Welcome back. Good news for Nigerians anxious about their loved ones fleeing the war in Ukraine, as over 400 Nigerian students who were stranded in Romania while fleeing the conflict in Ukraine have been evacuated back home by the Nigerian government. They arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. The MAX air flight carrying the returnees arrived at the airport at about 7 a.m. this morning and is the first of many flights expected to return Nigerians stranded in various countries in Europe who are fleeing the war between Ukraine and Russia.
The flight from Romania conveying Nigerians stranded there while fleeing from the war in Ukraine was built to touch down in Abuja at 3:30 a.m. Friday morning. As the hours went by, the media awaited any information on when the plane would arrive with the returnees. Finally, at about 7 a.m., the plane landed, carrying with it over 450 students and a few government officials. The welcome party, made up of several agencies of government, boarded the aircraft and addressed the returnees.
As you come down in two files, we will walk straight to meet with Ports Authority, and there the Health Ports Authority will give you forms to fill. We will only take your samples for the COVID test. As you are all aware, it was waived for us before you got on the plane. The moment that is done, you will be directed to immigration. And as soon as you are done with immigration, we will direct you to where you will collect a token of transportation for you to be able to head back home.
The chief whip of the House of Representatives, who was part of the delegation that went to Romania to bring back the returnees, says Nigerian foreign missions need to be better prepared for crisis situations such as this one.
Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, through the federal government, next time, going forward, should try to envisage some of these things as by way of emergency anticipation, so that when we are budgeting, we budget for the missions to be able to address these kind of circumstances whenever they come up.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs lays out its plan for the returnees, especially in terms of continuing their education.
Our government is already talking with the governments of Poland, of Greece, of Romania, and Hungary to see if those of them that are in their fifth year medical year, fifth and sixth year, can actually go back to universities in these countries to be able to complete their studies.
While the students are being profiled and tested for COVID-19, they would be given $100 each to return to their various destinations across the country. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Our technology correspondent Victor Matthias has been following the evacuation process on social media, keeping track of those Nigerians who are leaving either Romania or Hungary or leaving Poland, trying to get back to the country. And for those who are yet to be evacuated, Victor's live conversation begins now, and you can follow on all of our platforms on social media. It's at Channels TV on Twitter, at Channels Television on Instagram, and at Channels Television's web on YouTube. You can watch live now. Victor, take it away.
Permit and stay here and continue my life from here, because home is not safe. Everybody knows this. It's not. So I would rather continue my life from here. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you just if you break it down, perhaps I would understand.
I should break it down in what sense? What you don't understand?
So when you say home is not safe, I'm beginning to think, I'm beginning to wonder, like some of us are here, but I mean, if you say it's not safe?
Yeah, okay. Now, do you know the current problem Nigeria is facing concerning fuel scarcity, everything that is going on in the country right now? So now you not expect me to come home and face the same thing when I just survived the war. I will never do that. Like, my mental health is more important than me saying, oh yes, I know I have a home country, but I will not do that to myself. It's not safe. So I would rather pursue my career from here. I take it higher than drag myself back. No, I will not do that.
All right. Well, I guess again, it's different strokes for different folks.
Yes.
Emeka, in your own instance, would you come back home given the opportunity? I think your mic is on mute.
Yeah, given the situation right now, I will come back home, but I won't be staying home for long. That is the truth. He's right, because I am currently doing my master's here. I finished my 6 years of medical school here, and I'm doing a specialty course. My specialty course is going to take me 3 years. Should have taken me 3 years, if not for this war. But if I'm doing a specialty course in Nigeria, it should take me more than 5 to 6 years, if not 7 years, just to go through the same course that will take me 3 years here. So why should I come home? There's no need to come home. He was saying he's right. I mean, I'm moving ahead with my life. Why should I take myself back? It will draw me back. So if I can finish a course in 3 years, why should I come back home and try to do it in 5 to 6 years? I will come back home because of this war, yes. But truthfully, the truth is that I will find a way to live.
All right. Very well. Dr. Bamshai, let me just come to you now. Speaking of, you made mention of mental health. In all of this, you have seen overall. What's your take on this? Because, like you said, like Lukman said, he just survived the war. So let's even look at those who are already back in Nigeria. How is this going to affect their mental health, and what can they be doing, to all of this in check?
Thank you. For those who are back to Nigeria, they will find out real quick that home will always be home, and that from that home they can always launch to go wherever they want to go. I personally, I am a global citizen. I go wherever I want to go, but I will never speak in disparaging terms on my country. As much as we have our struggles, we are still surviving and we are still good. And Nigeria has done quite a lot for us, and we can only get better from where we are. But on the mental health and what people can be doing, we need right now to focus on what will happen in the short term, which is just get better, relax, breathe in, appreciate your existence, not to mock those who have died, but at least you have something to be thankful for, that you are alive. And then in the intermediate, you think of what do you do next. Those who are in medical school, is there a way that they can be absorbed into the Nigerian medical, into the medical schools, for them to just finish up this year and get going? I mean, those who are in final year, whatsoever course they may be,
Is that a possibility? Is that we need to also think about how possible it is to go to other neighboring European countries who may very soon be opening such opportunities. For that to happen with European credit score system. So it's possible that they may be able to move into European countries going forward. And those who have really just started school may also think of what to do. If they want to, some may choose to just stay back in Nigeria. But again, for many people, I can say that from my own personal experience, this may be a good time within the next maybe 3-4 months that we are unsure of many things. This may be a good time to pick up a new language to learn, maybe German, maybe French, maybe whatever new language. This may be a good time to pick that up. Not just spoken languages, computer languages. We are in a world that is literally computerized right now. This may also be a good time to start learning coding because there are many opportunities that arise with that, and you can always juxtapose that with whatever it is you are studying, be it medicine, architecture, whatever it is. So this may be time to pick up new skills before the long-term plan materializes. And for those who are choosing right now not to come home, I want to beg you, please get all the right information. I beg you. Because for now, I know in Europe allows you to stay if you have a permanent residency in Ukraine. If you don't have a permanent residency, you are living on borrowed time in the country, except if the law is revised. And don't think for 1 minute that the visa you have right now is an equivalent of a D visa or a B or plus C visa. Sometimes for you to come back, you will be required to get admission in the school that you want and then come back to your own country to apply for visa. So I beg you, whatever you do, the right information, the correct information is very paramount because there's just a thin line between opportunities and becoming an illegal immigrant. Very thin, yeah.
Okay, Emeka, let me just come back to you now. Of course, we understand you're in Sumi and so much is going on there, especially the explosion that we understand happened yesterday. How has that affected you? Because we understand some places have had light cuts, some places water cuts, some places internet cuts as well. But in your own location, what has been the effect of that explosion?
Well, my own has actually been water. We've not had water since yesterday. So to that since yesterday to this evening. So let's just call it a whole day without water. And we are not sure when the water is going to come in because I asked the security guard, the hostel guy in charge of the security. I asked him this morning when we should be expecting water. What he said to me was, I don't know. So we are not sure when water will come in 2 days from now, 3 days from now, a week from now. Nobody is sure. Nobody knows.
Well, hopefully that is sorted out soon. But in terms of safety, how safe are you? Because if this is happening kind of close by, have you been hearing gunshots or maybe sound of explosions?
Well, thankfully, yesterday was actually okay. Yesterday evening and I think day before yesterday in the morning was actually the first times we heard explosions. It was the first time we actually had explosions in Sumi here. Thankfully, it has always been warnings and air raids and then attacks in places that are roughly an hour from here or 1 hour 30 minutes from here. So, but the problem is, well, like I said earlier when I was talking, war is a fluid situation. Nobody knows when it's going to happen. Nobody knows the city that is going to be planned next. Nobody really. We're not in the Russian military or in the Ukrainian military to know their intelligence, to know what is going to be planned next. We are just bystanders, and like I said, war is a fluid situation. So we don't know what next is going to happen or where it's going to be hit next. That's the problem we are having now. We don't know if we are going to turn to the next Kharkiv or Kyiv. We are not sure.
Well, let's hope it never gets to you. Let's hope you remain safe. Let's hope you don't have any more cuts, as a result of explosions or as a result of, exchange of gunfire let's hope you and all those who are with you where you are remain safe. Please keep in touch. As I always say, let's know how you're doing, and of course, we'll keep amplifying your voices so that the authorities know what is going on with you where you are. But again, it's a live Facebook live chat via Zoom of Channels Television on the Ukrainian issue. That's the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Amarachi, like you just heard Emeka talking about things that they are going through in Sumi, where of course they've been locked and they have been unable. And Millicent is back to you guys now.
Thanks a lot, Victor. And you know where to follow the conversation with Victor today regarding the situation in Ukraine and Nigerians who are there. We have been following from here also. There is another Nigerian who's also stuck in Sumi.
Yes, indeed. Aisha Oguyemi, thank you for joining us. Aisha.
Hello, good evening.
All right, Aisha, explain the situation. You're in Sumi at the moment. You're saying you've not been able to get out of there. Explain what's really going on.
Okay. Yes, I mean, Sumi currently, the trains aren't working. There are no buses, and our school has been asking us to stay put, to stay calm. We've had no way of leaving the city, and everyone we've been reaching out to has been telling us to stay indoors and stay calm, but things just keep getting worse.
In terms of supplies, food, I mean, energy, is there lights? We heard that there have been power cuts.
Yes, there have been. I heard that they bombed the station. I'm not so sure about that, but the hostel where I was, there was no light, no water, nothing. I had to move into another hostel where I'm currently to get light to charge my phone, but there's still no water.
Aisha, just thinking, that this is not the kind of situation you ever hope to face at all. You're just in Ukraine to study, get your degree, and leave. How does it make you feel being in a place which is cut off from the rest of the world right now because there is no access road in and there's no way for you to get out of Sumi at the moment?
I mean, it's a terrible thing to happen to anyone, and I feel very scared because I have no idea when next there will be attacks. I don't know when next they will bomb. If the next place they will bomb will be my hostel or all that. So I am actually very scared and frightened, and I hope to get help soon.
Aisha, when you spoke to me earlier, you talked about a number of people who are also stuck. In terms of Nigerian students, what are those numbers?
There's about 1,500 students, but I think about 500 of them are Nigerians.
Have you tried reaching, the Nigerian mission? Has there been any way, have you heard from the Nigerian government on anything? I know there have been talks about safe corridors, and this is for humanitarian access. Have you heard anything?
Yes, I have. Even my school has talked about the safe corridor, and they still told us to still wait. And if there's any way we can be moved out, they will let us know, and they will organize buses for us. But they still haven't reached back to us about that.
I know we asked you earlier about how you're doing with food and with supplies, but exactly how are you getting them? Are stores open?
Yes, grocery stores are open, the stores where you get food and water are open, but other stores are closed, so you can still get food.
But there is the possibility of things running out, right? So how exactly are you preparing for that? How are you preparing for any eventualities outside of rescue from either the Nigerian government or anyone else?
Well, I'm not exactly prepared for things like that, but there have been people that have been reaching out to us, supporting us and providing funds and food, and my school is trying getting us some food and water for the meantime.
So it is, you're staying at the hostel in school, Aisha?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Aisha, thanks again for speaking with us and telling us your story. We also appreciate the courage that you have shown, as well as other Nigerians who are stuck in Sumi. We pray that you will find a way out as soon as possible, or that there will be no bombings or shellings in your area. Thanks again.
Very difficult situation to be in. But in the meantime, NATO allies have rejected Ukraine's demand for no-fly zones, saying they were increasing support, but that stepping in directly would lead to a broader, even more brutal European war, so far limited to Russia's assault on its neighbor. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for Western powers to enforce no-fly zones since Moscow's invasion started 9 days ago, with Russia shelling cities and bringing fighting to Europe's largest nuclear plant. NATO members have been sending arms to Ukraine, but stopped short of military action that would put them in direct conflict with Russia. The only way for NATO to implement a no-fly zone would be to send NATO planes to shoot down Russian ones, Stoltenberg said, adding that the risk of escalation would be too big.
What is taking place in Ukraine now is horrific. It's painful, and we see human suffering, we see destruction at a scale we haven't seen in Europe since the Second World War. And I would like to commend the courage of the Ukrainian people standing up against the Russian invasion, standing up against Putin's forces. NATO is a defensive alliance. Our core task is to keep our 30 nations safe. We are not part of this conflict, and we have a responsibility to ensure it does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine, because that would be even more devastating and more dangerous. So we have made it clear that we are not going to move into Ukraine, neither on the ground or in the Ukrainian airspace. And of course, the only way to implement a no-fly zone is to send NATO planes, fighter planes, into Ukrainian airspace, and then impose that no-fly zone by shooting down Russian planes.
You're watching our 1 hour coverage focused on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Coming up after the break, the UN rights body approves investigations into alleged Russian violations in Ukraine. Join us again.
Stay connected to the world with Channels TV Podcast and get all the trending stories. Simply log on to channelstv.com, click on podcast, select the program of your choice, and listen. Our podcast is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Tap the expertise you trust. Touch the stories that touch you. Anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back. The UN Human Rights Council has condemned alleged rights violations by Russia in its invasion of Ukraine and agreed to set up a commission to investigate them, including possible war crimes. 32 members of the council voted in favor of the resolution brought by Ukraine. Russia and Eritrea voted against it, while 13, including China, abstained. The Geneva-based council cannot make legally binding decisions, but its decisions send important political messages and can authorize investigations such as the one to be carried out by the 3-person commission created by today's vote. Russia has called its actions since February 24th, a special operation has denied targeted civilians in Ukraine.
Today, the Human Rights Council adopted a historic resolution. The adoption of this resolution marks the end of the week which has seen Russia isolated at the international level. UN members from all regions around the world joined together at the Council to condemn Russia's aggression against Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. The message to Putin has been clear. You're isolated on a global level, and the whole world is against you. And today, we have seen an overwhelming majority of the Human Rights Council vote to create a strong new commission of inquiry to investigate Russia's barbarous acts. And those from Russia directing and committing violations against my people should be paying attention. The evidence is going to be collected, you're going to be identified, and you're going to be held to account.
Well, since Thursday, an advance team left the International Criminal Court in The Hague for the Ukraine region to start investigating possible war crimes. Their departure came hours after prosecutor Karim Khan said he would start collecting evidence as part of a formal investigation launched after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine that began the 24th of February. Mr. Khan said his office would be examining possible war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, the offences under the court's jurisdiction by all parties in the conflict. Neither Russia nor Ukraine are members of the ICC, and Moscow does not recognise the court, which was established in 1997 by the Rome Statute and opened in The Hague in 2002.
Right, so though not a member of the ICC, Ukraine signed a declaration in 2014 giving the court jurisdiction over alleged grave crimes committed on its territory from 2014 onwards, regardless of the nationality of the prosecutors. The ICC has 123 member states. It prosecutes individuals responsible for worse atrocities when a country is unable or unwilling to do so. Joining us to discuss this is a former ICC prosecutor, Charles Adogun Phillips. Thank you for joining us on the program today. Just wondering give us your thoughts on this. Russia to the ICC.
Thank you, Amarachi, and it's good to be on the program again. There are essentially 4 offences that ICC prosecutors can bring charges on. Those offences are
We seem to be having problems connecting with them just at the last minute. So we did tell you earlier, of course, though it's not a member of the ICC, Ukraine did sign its declaration in 2014, given the court's jurisdiction of alleged grave crimes committed on its territory from 2014 onwards.
Indeed, and the ICC, it has about 123 member states. Says it prosecutes individuals responsible for the worst atrocities. Of course, the world is watching as to the investigation with regards to the situation with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, let's take a look at perhaps what the ICC had to say about the possible war crimes.
Well, it's early days. We had the referral yesterday, as you mentioned, 39 states, critically important moment, not only for the solidarity that it demonstrates in terms of the rule of law and the obligations under international humanitarian law, but also it's a trigger. It allows me to act and investigate. So to answer your question, yes, yesterday I formulated a team, and today they are moving to the region. Firstly, it's an advanced team, comprised of investigators and lawyers, but also those with particular experience in operational planning. But, of course, one won't reveal at this stage the form it will take, but we're moving to the region today. They're taking off probably about now. The law of war continues to apply, and we have clear jurisdiction. This is a reminder to all factions, to all parties to the conflict, that they must conduct themselves in compliance with the laws of war. Drilling down, of course, the obligation is to conduct credible investigations, which means there's no destination that is predetermined. We have to get to the truth.
Will be interesting to see, what those charges are against Russia. I know that possible war crimes is on the list, and it's interesting, that Russia is being accused of that, when there are other countries, other superpowers who have committed crimes, have been dragged to the ICC and have not been prosecuted.
That is true, and that's what a lot of people are reacting to. Experts saying, well, who knows how this is really going to go. But they've talked about, the ICC, when they talk about war crimes, pretty much crimes against humanity, genocide, and some of these offences under the court's jurisdiction we've seen in several cases. And it's also interesting to note that for this case involving Russia's invasion of Ukraine, they will also be looking back at what happened in 2014 with Crimea's annexation and the like. So someone said perhaps there might be...
But isn't it a bit too late, though, going back to 2014? I mean, Russia was never signatory to the ICC. Many of the countries who have brought allegations against other countries have not been members as well. I know the cases have been brought against the United States, but it's never, ever allowed any of the prosecutors in to the US to ever prosecute. So just a review of the major stories today, one of which is Nigerians, the first batch of Nigerians who have made it back to the country.
That is true, and others are also expected today.
Yeah.
Other flights.
Going back to our conversation now with Charles Adeogun-Phillips. Charles, you were talking about the four possible cases before the ICC against Russia.
Sorry, we got cut off. Yes, I was saying that the ICC has jurisdiction over the crime of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The crime of aggression, which has never been the subject of any trials before any international court, because the crime exists only on paper. It's never been put to test. That crime involves the invasion of another state, which is exactly what Russia has done to Ukraine. So on the face of it, it would seem as though the crime of aggression is directly relevant to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But there are certain limitations to the ICC's jurisdiction in relation to this crime. The first limitation is as follows. Because Russia is not a state party to the Rome Statute of the ICC, the court is unable to assume jurisdiction over that crime. And it's important to state this because not being a state party of the ICC, its citizens cannot be subject to the prosecution by the ICC for this specific offense. That notwithstanding, the Security Council of the United Nations can actually refer the matter to the ICC prosecutor. But the problem with that, of course, is that Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and it will, of course, exercise its veto power. So this is not going to happen. So the only options open to the ICC prosecutor is to proceed on the crime against humanity on the basis that these were attacks committed as part of a widespread and systematic attack directed at members of the civilian population. It would also proceed on the basis that conventions of war have been breached, which is what we know as war crimes. And it is possible, of course, for the prosecutor of the ICC to proceed in this regard because Ukraine, even though it's not a member of the court, has actually submitted to the jurisdiction of the court previously, and the court now has an open-ended basis upon which it can assume jurisdiction over crimes committed in the territory of Ukraine. Now, it is important for the international community to proceed against Russia and Mr. Putin in particular for the crime of aggression. And there are the models that they can pursue and consider, bearing in mind that the ICC cannot proceed with the crime of aggression. One of those models, of course.
Yeah, just to quickly jump in, and this is to ask about the investigation. We just have a few seconds before we wrap up the program. In terms of the mode of investigation, do you think that there is a bias already with the ICC on this invasion?
I don't think there's a bias. I think there is enough investigative material that exists to indicate that civilians were targeted by Russia We've all been witnesses to the videos showing on international media, which have shown that schools, hospitals, and private residences have actually been the subject of attack. Now, those citizens and those civilians are not the subject of war.
Well, Charles Adiogu Phillips, I do apologize. We didn't have enough time to spend with you. We regret that. We might have to bring you back to talk some more about this, because we know that issues are still developing as regards Ukraine and Russia's war there. Thank you again for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, South Koreans have held a candlelight vigil near the Russian embassy in Seoul. This is in solidarity with the Ukrainian people.
There it is, holding their candles and sitting in silence in the dark.
That's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.
And I'm Amarachi Ubani.